All right, my name is Ben Roussel. I'm on the council, the board for the Gulf Coast Council of FFI. I'm also a Red Stick fly fisher member that lives in Baton Rouge. I joined this board last year, and the whole reason I joined was because I was interested in this program particularly, which is the Suncatch Challenge, which is a program that it's kind of like our Jambalaya Challenge, except more specific to sunfish and all the sunfish that you can find across the Southeast, or at least the Southeast in our council boundaries, which is Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and the panhandle of Florida. I think it's like you go to Tallahassee, you're too far. I mean, somewhere around there. Maybe the Apalachicola River, west of the Apalachicola. So this was something I started doing. Well, sunfish were something I've been interested in, obviously, since I started fly fishing. I mean, catching bluegill, and poppers is a ton of fun. And it's never, that fun has never worn off for me. I'll chase, I've gone to redfish, chase bass. I go to cutthroat, chase trout out west, and still have fun catching bluegill and all the other sunfish. I just love how they eat. They always are ready to eat. They're always willing to eat. They're not fussy about it usually. So I'm friends with the sunfish. I love the sunfish. So we'll talk about the challenge. There's a website, obviously. If you go to the Gulf Coast Council's webpage, Suncatch is right there in the top ribbon. It's hard to see, but I just was showing you the website. Again, it's a program that the Gulf Coast Council started, and before I was on the board, it was started. I think Catch Cormier was instrumental in getting it off the ground, and it started in April of 2021. It just highlights the species diversity among sunfish in our area. And if you're familiar with the cut catch or the bass catch program that FFI does, it kind of mimics that, which is you basically go out, you catch these species, turn in your photos, and at some level you get an award. So for our sunfish, qualifying sunfish species, we actually have 19, and that's new this year. And I'll go through all of them at the end. And I just wanted to highlight at the bottom, the words are probably impossible to read, but so far we've had 10 different people participate, and they've turned in 63 entries, and a total of 16 different species has been caught, which is, I think, pretty cool, 16 of the 19. It's going to be hard to catch the other 3, and I'll explain why. But it's 19 species from family Suncatchidae. I don't even know if I say that right, or Suncatchidae. There are 3 levels you can achieve awards at, 8 species, 12, and 16. Right now, the only award we actually have finalized is the mug at 8 species. We're working on something for 12, as Brian has actually caught 13 now. Anyone who's an FFI member can participate, and you just, it's kind of like Jambalaya Challenge, so you submit along the way. So every time you catch one, you would submit on the website. We have 5 folks who have hit award level so far. Chris Williams at 11, myself at 11, Brian has 13, Bill Morrison from Central Louisiana has 8, and then Kirk Dietrich from New Orleans has 9. So obviously we here in Louisiana enjoy the program because it's open to all FFI members across all of the clubs that participate in the Gulf Coast Council, and we seem to be the ones participating the most. And again, it's free to anyone who's an FFI member. Obviously, this fish has to be caught on flies. It is a fly fishing organization. Public water, so it's a little different than our Jambalaya Challenge. We only want public water submissions. You only have to submit one species per entry, and if you say you catch a small one and you catch a big one later, you can always have the picture replaced. There's no time frame to complete the challenge. This is intended to be kind of a lifetime thing. You're just racking up the species as you go, which is kind of why I wanted to talk about it here, because shoot, a lot of you guys have caught several sunfish already for the Jambalaya Challenge, and those could definitely be used. I already went through the borders. Obviously, you want to handle the fish with care. Don't be an idiot. Don't treat them, like I don't know, like you're gonna eat them, unless you are eating them. But they don't want to see pictures of fish on stringers or even on dirt,
No ice chest fish.
No ice chest fish.
Now, the definition for fly, what a fly is there a strict on it?
Ooh.
I mean, that's a whole other.
No, and I'm the person that looks at it, as long as it looks like a fly, I'll allow it. And don't throw a Rapala or a plastic worm on your fly rod. I know somebody wrote a book about throwing plastic worms on a fly rod, but that's not how I roll. If it can be digested, naturally by the fish, how about that? The submission process is the same as Jambalaya Challenge, so it's the same form essentially, and you can include a picture at the end. So you just have to include, the water body you caught it in, the species, the date, a photograph to be included with it, and obviously if you need to email that photo, you can do that to the email provided on the website. And one thing we don't accept is hybrids. So this is not a hybrids. Like if you have something that looks close, I'll encourage to try and catch another species that more accurately represents, what you're trying to submit. That's the form. It's the same. It's pretty much identical to the Jambalaya Challenge form. Same with the database. The database looks the exact same. Again, the photo, just like Jambalaya Challenge, you need to have the fish in there and either a fly rod in the background or the fly in the picture. That's just verification that you caught it on the fly. And that way we don't have to have like a code or anything either. Fish should be alive in the photo. Again, no ice chest fish, no driveway fish. You want the fish positioned on its side, and it doesn't matter which way it faces, whether it's right or left, but if you can, I don't like it for the Jambalaya Challenge when people hold it vertically. A lot of times I actually rotate the photo. I'd prefer if you can get whatever fish you submit horizontally. It's just easier to look at. Obviously, the photos need to be clear and sharp. You don't want blurry photos. Safe handling techniques. Keep them wet practices. I'm not going to preach to you guys about that. Y'all are all adults. But this is an example of good photo submissions. These are sunfish. You should be able to hold them in your hand. Every once in a while, I guess they get bigger than your hand, but you still should be able to hold them in your hand. They're not going to bite you. They might poke you with their fins, but man up. Grab them. Try and wet your hands before you do. But this is another list of the species. I have this broken down. This was something in my brain that worked out better than I think it looks in the presentation. So obviously the boundaries are on the right. I have a percentage next to each sunfish, and the way I achieved this percentage was this is the area within the boundaries that you could run into this species according to their watershed, if that makes any sense at all. So, like for instance, bluegill occupy 100% of that area you see. They're in every watershed in that. Whereas a bantam sunfish is really only found in 40% of those watersheds. So, it's on you to do the research to figure out which 40% those are and then target those. In terms of the species, we list, the smallest, area would be the mud sunfish, which is actually less than 1% of the boundary. It's only in one watershed in Alabama. Beaver Dam Creek is the creek, and you have to be pretty damn lucky to catch one or to even come across one. Brian was lucky enough to do so. So it can be done.
They're in there. They must be delicious.
But there's some other sunfish that are going to be hard to come across, and we'll talk about those too. But let's move on to the actual fish themselves, because the program is very similar to Jumbo Life Challenge. I think y'all are all familiar with it. We've had over 300 entries from a lot of people this year in that. So it's as long as you're an FFI member, you can also participate in this. Yeah.
And what's the definition of public water?
I would say publicly accessible, like if you can access it from, see, and that's tough because a lot of streams, right, you're getting into them, probably trespassing, probably via private. And if it's in a river, like a named stream, like I'm not gonna turn it down, right? Like that's kind of like my own, if you can legally get to that stream, who am I to say, you trespass?
So avoid neighborhood ponds.
Yeah, the big thing is we just don't want neighborhood pond submissions or,
That was
that kind of thing.
A subdivision pond that's open to the public.
If you can show me a sign that says this was open to the public, then yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I'll allow it. But I don't know. Does John Q. Public, know that neighborhood is open? It's kind of like Lake Rosemount in St. Francisville. Like technically, that's a private, water body. So I can't submit all the crappie I catch, all the saccalay I catch out of there.
Wait, this is not a notice thing, this is a
Nope.
species thing.
No, right. Water.
So it wouldn't really matter that much.
No.
Yeah, there's nothing that's in a private pond, it's not in a brick pond somewhere.
Like sunfish, somewhere.
And honestly, and I'll be honest, sunfish in ponds are not the sunfish you want to target because sunfish in ponds hybridize very readily. So the ponds themselves, the smaller the pond, the tougher the habitat is for them to find. Because they all kind of specialize in their own niche habitat. And that's where a river or an open system, it's easier for them to find those niche habitats. But when you force them into a pond, well then they're all in the same habitat. And what happens is they just spawn together. And so, because they're not picking out partners, it's just broadcast spawning. So then you start to see these, mutts. You start to see fish that look, kind of like one and the other. And so it's hard when people, even in the Jumbo Light Challenge, when people submit pond sunfish, for the most part, I'm kind of like, it doesn't really matter if it looks like somewhat like this fish, then I'll allow it. But in this is, I'm a lot more, I guess, species specific in this, just because the whole idea is that you're accumulating these species, whereas Jumbo Light Challenge, you're just accumulating an entry into a raffle, essentially. I'd rather everyone have a bunch of entries. But anyway, that soapbox aside, where can you go to target these sunfish? This is just an example of habitat for flyer, dollar sunfish, and warmouth, which are goggle eye. This is in the Amy River Basin, and this is on public land. This is on the Maurepas Swamp WMA. You can walk along that power line. There's a trail from a parking area, and it leads you to great habitat for these species, as well as other species too. There's saccalay, there's bluegill, there's gar, there's shoepig, there's bass. There's all kind of stuff there. But that's the kind of thing that I look for some of these lowland sunfish species. Bluegill. We could talk bluegill. I don't want to spend a lot of time on bluegill because I think everyone in here has probably caught a bluegill and knows where to find a bluegill. There are some cool looking ones, and that's what I'm showing you on the lower right in the Apalachicola system. They call them pied brim, and they have big areas of black splotches on them. So you know, if you have some time, you can go target them over there and try to run into some of those.
Those count as a different entry.
No, and that's what I was going to get to. Is for the purposes of this, even copper-nosed bluegill are all just bluegill in this, unless you know there's a paper out there that someone wants to point me to that specifically specifies this is a different species, and in Florida even right, all the states recognize it as a different species. Yeah, but it's a good question because there's a lot of that's going to happen. Like it's going to happen with long ear. You'll see. There's already a paper that was published in splitting up long ear sunfish into, I don't know, like 6 or 7.
There was 4 or 5, maybe it's more than that.
Yeah, it might be, I don't know. Either way,
It's a lot.
it's at least 3 in Louisiana, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And right now, I'm kind of sticking to long ear until, state agencies start accepting it. But obviously bluegill are everywhere. And there's not really, I couldn't tell you a specific fly that would be better than any others, because if you have something that looks somewhat edible, they will eat it at a certain time of year. Obviously in the winter, it might be a little tougher, it might be a slower bite. Oh, and the way I have this list broken down is actually by the percentage within the boundaries. So bluegill, 100% of the boundary you can find. Red ear, actually right behind. You can find red ear in every watershed in this in the council. And the pictures are there to help you identify the species should you need help with identification. A really good website is KOAW, is it just .org or .com?
.org, yep.
Yeah. That guy has done a fantastic job with sunfish identification. He has videos on YouTube. That's why I don't tend to go into too much detail, because there's other people that have done the identification thing a lot better than I have. I'm trying to help you find where you need to go to catch these species. I don't think bluegill need a whole lot of talk. Red ear, I would say, tend to hang a little bit deeper than bluegill. At least that's how I've found them. Somebody's told me the spawn around the full moons in March and April, and I'll agree to that, is the time to target them. That's when you start to see them come shallow. And I've seen them, again, in Rosemound, just stack up under a boat dock. And I mean, you're talking, 10 inch red ear, maybe 12 inch, 8 to 12, like just easy to catch, one right after the other. Same places you find bluegill, I find. They like to eat crustaceans, snails, clams, so hence the nickname shellcracker. If you have those in your pond, there's a good chance you might have red ear. If you want to target them with flies, maybe try a little heavier fly than say, like bluegill, I really like fishing with soft tackles. Like if you're not using a popper, I like hanging a soft tackle on her. It's the slow fall and the undulating hackle just is deadly. I mean, it's deadly for anything. Trout, bluegill, any sunfish. But red ear, you want it to fall a little bit faster because you want it to get below those bluegill and the green sunfish. And so maybe maybe not dumbbell, but bead chain eyes, maybe something a little bit heavier, small dumbbell, something to just drop it, to get below the other fish. The next one with the biggest, I still think it's like 99%, long ear sunfish. And these can get tricky to identify just because.
Would you like a little interlude before you leave red ear?
Yeah, what?
You know what they call them down here in Cajun?
Chinkapin.
Chinkapin.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I said shell cracker,
Yeah,
chinkapin's
that's
another
for those-
name.
That's for those Yankees up in North Louisiana. We don't use that down here.
Well, in Georgia, they call them shell cracker. That's where I was raised. Long-eared sunfish can look different from watershed to watershed, so it's kind of tough. They're usually the most colorful fish you'll catch, though, in the water. I think they're up there as being some of the prettiest freshwater fish we can catch in the country. Like I said earlier, there's a talk of a split in the long-ear family. So, you know, you get up to Arkansas, those will be slightly different than, say, the ones in, you know, East Texas, and those will be different from the ones we have here, and those will even be different from the ones in the Panhandle of Florida. But bright spots on them, you get real bright colors, orange, red bellies, you know, bright blue, turquoise spots a lot of times.
Is it the type of water body that kind of promotes the vibrant coloring, like kind of like a sandy creek?
I know, well, that's where I catch them the most, right? I don't know if it's the water body itself. I do think black water, like fish tend to be more black in black water, so it's more of an environmental thing. You know, their colors are gonna try and match, you know, the habitat they're around. But there are longer that live in black water, like say those Florida rivers, like the Blackwater River and others. But yeah, I do tend to find like the ones in Bayou Sarah and Thompson Creek look a lot more orange, you know, than the ones in the Amite or the Tangipahoa or some of the other waterways we have. It just varies. I think it varies from watershed to watershed. But you primarily find them in creeks and rivers. You can find them in the swamps too. We have them in the lowland areas, and they look slightly different as well. You got to watch because, and I'll talk about dollar sunfish, but dollar sunfish and long-eared sunfish look a lot alike. And I'll get into more of that, I guess, when I talk about dollars. But the place to catch them around here is the Comey, in my mind. If you want to catch a long-ear, go to the Comey or any of the sandy rivers we have. But that's where you can find lots
I
of
say it right now, all those creeks are real low, and so you just gotta go.
You just gotta find a deep pool, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Warmouths next, goggle eye, Dugan. I like warmouth. I like the way they look. I think they look like grouper, personally, when they're young. They're so aggressive. Their mouths are giant. I love how big their mouths are. So they can eat streamers, you know, if you really wanted to fish them with streamers. And they'll come out from structure like, you know, like a grouper. I mean, they'll be hanging under, you know, dead trees and root balls and stuff. But you can find them in swamps for sure. Black Lake is one that I can think of around in the Amite Basin that has plenty of them. But they'll be in our drainage ditches. I've caught them in the one right here, right behind Wildlife and Fisheries. They like soft muddy bottoms, aquatic veg, and they love cover. You know, if you see, you know, cover in a body of water, just fish around it long enough, you know, one might come out. But yeah, crawfish patterns, I've had them hit crankbaits on, you know, like red tackle, larger nymphs. They're not shy. Goggle eye are fun. The Chapeleye Basin has some big ones. I think that's the biggest I've caught, I think, has come out of there. Green sunfish look a lot like a warmouth sometimes because their mouth is very big. But these are the only ones that have the orange on the fin. A lot of times if you catch another sunfish that has orange on its fin, it doesn't look like a green sunfish. It's probably a hybrid. They probably hybridize with a green sunfish. To me, they got like kind of Halloween colors on them. You got a lot more black and orange But they have those almost, they look like stripes, kind of like turquoise blue stripes on them. They got a lot of turquoise around the face. They get pretty though when they get big and colored up. This is a fish that I've found in probably every body of water I've ever fished, especially the ones that are gross. You know, the places you're gonna get tetanus, you know, you'll find green sunfish.
Apple Lake.
You know, I fished, I guess it's Ward Creek once off of Seagan over there by the mall. Now it's Topgolf is over there. And it was a day in like April, it was hot, but I caught probably like 6 or 7 species. The next day I had more ulcers in my mouth than I've ever had in my life. And it was probably from wetting the knot and wetting the line. So I'm just a fair warning to anyone that fishes the drainage ditches around town. Do not wet your knots with saliva. But there's plenty of green sunfish in there.
Fish at your own risk.
Cleared and snagged and it looks awful now, to be honest. That spot's probably dead for a while. But similar to bluegill though, they're found everywhere. Look for low quality water and you'll find them. Like I don't tend to catch them in the clear water places where I catch longyear, I'll tell you that.
The catfish pond at Waddell also has them.
Yeah, they love a pond. If a pond is connected to a drainage ditch, that's a green sunfish habitat for sure. Capitol Lake, all the rocks around Capitol Lake, gosh, they're all over the place. There's a lot of orange spotted sunfish over there too, but you will have to pick your way through green sunfish to get to the orange spotted. Red spotted, I love red spotted sunfish. It was a long time before I actually caught a red spotted sunfish. That's a stump knocker down here, I guess. I think in Florida they call these and spotted sunfish are both called stump knocker, I think. But these are to me, they're swampy inhabitants. You're gonna find them more like around goggle eye water, warmouth water. But we have them in drainage ditches here too. And usually when you find them, you find a bunch of them. So, you know, remember that spot where you found them. What's that, Old Hammond Park, that creek that runs behind Old Hammond Highway Park has them. I'll give that spot away. It's got some pretty ones too. But they have a lot of red spots on them. Sometimes the spots are faint, sometimes they're orange. The thing to look for is that they'll get a little blue in their eyelid, a little shading over the eyelid. Their eyes tend to be redder than other fish that I've caught, other sunfish. Their spots, the red spots, tend to be like in rows. It's symmetrical. They don't tend to be varied. But their fins will get a little red too, a little bit, a little hint of that red. I think they're really pretty though when you catch a really colored up species. But you know, same type of habitat as warmouth. You know, muddy bottoms, aquatic veg, stumps and trees. Obviously, they like stump knockers. They like timber. And yeah, surface, subsurface shouldn't matter. I found when I was catching them earlier this year that the bite was a little bit slower than some of the other species. You know, longer are really aggressive. They'll hit it. A red spotted, sometimes you have to kind of be a little bit more patient with. And that could just be, you know, anecdotal. Dollar sunfish. So these are the ones that look a lot like longyear. One of the dead giveaways for me with dollars, they are smaller. They're generally more symmetrical and round. Spots on the ear flap is if they have that, that's kind of the dead giveaway. A lot of times, if you can tell, and I don't, the laser pointer, I'm looking at TV, but along their lateral line is a row of scales that's generally red. Sometimes it's orange, but it's basically the lateral line is that hump that goes from their ear flap down back to the tail, and that's what they, fish since with. And typically, it's devoid of the other turquoise spots that are on the fish, that just in that line. Hard to describe without one being here. I also look for, I don't know, that bottom right fish, if you can tell the yellow on that front of the belly. And I don't know if that's like a diagnostic for the species, but I tend to notice that yellow or orange on the belly in these is smaller than it would be in like a longer. Longer's gonna have that orange from front to back. This tends to just be a smaller area. You're gonna find these in swamps, again. You'll find them in ditches sometimes. They're smaller. They tend to hang out with each other. Sometimes if you find one, you'll find more of them. And they definitely have a niche, that they'll find it in a system and they'll stick to it. I couldn't tell you what it is. I just know that when I find them there one year, if I go back the next year, they're still there. So they like, there's a reason they like a certain spot. You may have to downsize to catch them. Those soft tackles will work for sure on dollar sunfish. Similar in size to a dollar is orange spotted sunfish. And I don't know if you can tell with the range, we're kind of reducing our range as we get further into the species list. Orange spotted sunfish though, there's really only one place that I found them, and it's Capitol Lake in Baton Rouge, which is funny because Capitol Lake's probably one of the worst lakes in terms of pollution there is. But that just goes to show you that it doesn't take high water quality for them to be there. But if you fish the lake long enough, you'll probably run into one, especially if you're floating a smaller nymph under a popper. I've heard them caught in University Lakes too, in Burbank. I think we got a report that somebody caught one in Burbank. All the data I read said slow-moving turbid creeks and rivers, backwater sloughs, ponds, lakes, muddy bottoms, aquatic veg, scattered cover. Think oxbows of the river. Downsize your flies if you want to target them.
Let's go with the smaller ones like this. If they're mixed in a pond with bluegill, they're going to be like pushed way into like the structure around. They're not out in the open water competing against bluegill for food. So if you fish like the edges where there's a bunch of weeds, there's some structure, they'll come out of a little hiding spot and hit a tiny fly. That's the way I usually find them.
And they're really pretty. The sheen, it's hard to describe the sheen on the side, is almost metallic. They have the little sporadic orange spots, but you'll know when you catch it that it's something different because that metallic, that shiny sheen that they have, it stands out. And when they spawn, they get pretty bright orange. The spots and the fins, the edges of the fins get pretty bright orange. They got a really, around that ear flap, the white border it almost is thicker, I think, than a lot of other sunfish. It seems to be more pronounced. Here's one I haven't caught, but we do have them in Louisiana, and actually you can tell Louisiana is probably a good place to target them. That's one thing that's cool about the Suncatch is I think Louisiana is probably the best place in the country to catch sunfish. We have almost all of these species that I go through. Bantam are one that I have not caught, so here's photos to see what they look like. I can't explain habitat. I know it's swampy. I think Chris has caught one that.
I've got the one that Koa agreed probably was, and I've caught and lost mid-landing another small, very round profile dark sunfish from that same spot. But it is weedy, swampy, shallow.
And these are small.
Oh yeah,
these are
an
the
adult male is about that big.
Right. Yeah. Kind of like the orange spots are very small too. So downsize your flies, obviously, because I think that even their mouths are small. It says they're the smallest of the Lepomans, which these are all the fish we're covering right now are Lepomans. try, smaller than a 14 for sure, you probably want to go smaller than an 18.
I might have been throwing 22s for top nose when I caught the one that I landed.
You're almost microfishing at some point
Yeah.
for these. It's kind of an in-between. You're not necessarily trying to catch shiners and top nose and killifish, but you will, because you're trying to target smaller sunfish. But swamps, sloughs, oxbows, associated with heavily vegetated water, would you agree?
Yeah, that spot was, it's been dead the last 2 years because the water got slow, the vegetation died, but when I caught the one and lost another, shallow, warm, heavily vegetated water with quite a diversity of sunfish, probably 5 or 6 species in that area, but
Okay.
they were always tight to the vegetation.
And that's what's kind of tough about targeting specific sunfish, is a lot of times you're finding other sunfish too. So it's cool because it's like, oh, there's another species, but if you're trying to specifically target one of them, like orange spots in Capitol Lake, sometimes you have to pick through, 3 or 4 before you really get to the one. But I know it was in the Maurepas Swamp somewhere, so.
Yeah. And there's a few, I think, iNaturalist records if you look around in the Maurepas Swamp area as well.
Yeah, and I know Robbie, who gave a talk earlier to our group, talked about how he has them in his neck of the woods, western Louisiana, thick, like they're all over his ditches. So I'm sure there's areas where they're, in good numbers. I just haven't seen it.
Well, and he electrofish, so they could be everywhere, and it's just they won't come out and hit a fly.
Yeah, that's very true. Spotted sunfish are one we don't have. So this is a cousin to the red spotted sunfish, except their spots are black and not red. And for a long time, spotted sunfish and red spotted sunfish were the same species. It was 1992, I think, where they split. They occupy the same habitat type, so swampy waters for sure. They'll be more prevalent in coastal drainages north and east of Apalachicola Bay. And then west of Mobile Bay, we're going to have red spotted. There's a zone in between where you could have both.
So what is your stance on fish caught in that zone?
If
Seems
it
that's
looks,
only shot
yeah,
and
if you
spotted.
catch fish in that zone and it looks like the spotted sunfish, then yeah, I'll allow it, because it happened to me this year. I was fishing a creek that drained into, I guess it was I think it wasn't Mobile Bay. It was the other side.
Further east, right?
Yeah. Is that Wolf Bay? I think it drained into Wolf Bay.
Maybe it's Wolf right there, yeah.
Yeah. And I caught spotted sunfish, and it looked clearly like a spotted sunfish. So, yeah, if you're in that integrated zone and you catch one. So yeah, I mean, you could theoretically go to, Baldwin County and try and catch one. But again, that's what they look like. They look a lot like red spotted, just instead of red spots, black spots. They still have the blue around the eye, which is really pretty. White-tipped fins, a lot of times, most of the times. The black spots, you'll see a lot of black spots around the head too.
Do the red spots show the white-tipped fins as well? I was just
They
showing
do.
David a picture of a really bright red one I've caught in the Blind River that
think
had
they
the
do.
white tipping as well.
Yeah.
It's the only one I've ever seen that way out here.
Yeah, I think they get it too. And it might, I don't know if it's something that they only have at certain times of the year, Another one that you're gonna have to drive to catch, redbreast sunfish. We don't have them in Louisiana that I know of. Maybe in the Toledo Bend spillway, maybe in the
In Toledo Bend
it's Toledo Bend
itself.
itself,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
Because they're introduced in Texas, and they're not introduced in all the waterways. So they're introduced in the Tennessee River drainage. So if you go to northern Alabama, you can catch them. They're introduced in the Chattahoochee River drainage. Well, they might be native. I don't know. Either way, they're in the Chattahoochee Apalachicola drainage. So if you want to go to Florida and target them, that's where you got to go. If you want to go to Alabama, you got to go to northern Alabama, or at least central and northern Alabama. They're pretty too. Their ear flap is actually the longest out of all the species. So despite the name long ear, redbreasts have a longer ear flap. People call them red bellies. in Georgia, I know for sure. But like Longyear though, you'll find them in rivers and creeks, more so than, I think more so than anywhere else I've found them in rivers. Look from around submerged rocks, overhanging banks. Yeah, all these sunfish typically live in the same, type of habitat as each other. Yeah, when you find them, they're there. Like you'll find a lot of them. Fish them as you would any of the other Laponids. And so I think that's the last Laponid actually. So then we included this year, we didn't have it initially, but we included the crappie, the sac-a-lait, into the Suncatch. It's just another way for you guys to add species. Obviously we have lots of black crappie, we have lots of white crappie in Louisiana. I tend to catch them more in the spring. I know there's guys that probably target them, in different times of the year, but I find them shallower in the spring, and little streamers, tend to work. Or what does Catch always say? Something under a Vosi. Yeah, that's how he targets them. They'll be in open water lakes, ponds, slow flowing backwaters or rivers, submerged timber, areas with abundant aquatic veg. You tend to find black crappie in clearer water, and white crappie you'll find in turbid water. I know that I've caught a couple in that Burbank pond, a white crappie that is. I don't know that I've caught a black one over there. But use small streamers, white woolly boogers work well, jig style flies. I think a lot of y'all know how to catch sac-a-lait then. I don't think that's something that's rare. But the white crappie, the white sac-a-lait is actually our state fish of Louisiana. I thought that was interesting. I didn't know that. And they probably call them white, what do they call them? White perch up north? Dugan? Yeah, you're my Louisiana vernacular expert.
I don't know what a sac-a-lait is.
Same habitat as black crappie, just fish it in turbid water. Same flies, use them. I catch them a lot in Rosemount, which is funny because that is not turbid at all, but I don't know if we have black crappie out there. But we do catch those in Rosemount early summer too. But you're fishing deep, off of trees and stuff. They'll be way up on the bank under the overhanging branches in the spring, in the early spring. And that's when it's fun to target them. Flyer are fun. It wasn't until, 2 years ago, I think, that I ran into flyer here.
Was it 2021
2020, 2021, something like that, 2 or 3?
It was whenever they first opened this, the Suncatch.
That would have been 21.
21, yes,
Yeah.
2 years ago.
Yeah. Flyer, we tend to find, so the way I describe a flyer, it's almost like a sac-a-lait, and just with the fin shape. It's got the big, top fin, bottom fin, almost like triple tail style fins. It's got a slash on its eye like a pickerel would have. That's a feature that you can look for. And I don't know if you can tell in the bottom left, that one has a spot on its fin. I really haven't seen that too prominently in the ones that I've caught, but it's right at the back of that top fin. There's kind of a black with a little orange on the outside. That's something that they have. The ones that I've caught are on the right, or at least 2 of them. They tend to have these black spots and lines on their body. And it's not all the way through, like a hybrid striper or something, or a white bass. It's just in places. But look for them in that black water, that tannin stained, acidic water, coastal swamps, backwater creeks, especially where there's some current. I think they like there to be moving water at least somewhere nearby. They might not be in it, but it needs to be moving. They hang out around submerged trees, roots, aquatic veg, cypress knees, floating vegetation mats. We found them in the Bailacombe watershed, and we've caught them on multiple trips there. And then I recently found them in the Amite River, which was kind of cool, because I wasn't targeting them, but I found them in that first picture I showed. But they always hit small streamers, jig-style flies, bigger nymphs. You don't have to necessarily size down for them, I found. It's hit or miss. Like I could tell you where the spot is, and I don't know that you'll catch one. It's just like maybe on the next trip, you know. It's a lot of these fish. It's like that, especially the next fish. This fish, shadow bass, is one of my favorite because I rarely catch them. But I don't know. I might be the person who's caught more of them, you know, in this club than a lot of other people over the last 10 years or so. But they live in those sandy rivers, those places you fish spotted bass and long ear. They're in the same, you know, habitat if you're fishing for spotted bass. And it's just hit or miss whether you'll find one. When you do, it's a treat. As you can see, the upper right one, he hit a popper. So they don't always hit subsurface flies, but I've had more luck on subsurface flies for them. They kind of look like a dairy cow. They're a little black, a little white. But it's essentially our rock bass. So they look a lot like a rock bass if you're familiar with a rock bass. The big difference between them and a rock bass is rock bass will have spots on them that, I gotta make sure that I'm saying this right. Okay, yeah, the spots tend to be in a line. You see the spots in a line. Because like that upper right one is a rock bass, but if you can tell, there's just there's lines on that fish. Not the vertical barring, but lines across horizontal. And shadow bass don't have that. If they have spots, they're gonna be in random locations. So that's the way that it was described to me, that how they're different. The big thing for me is it's range. If you're in shadow bass range, it's a shadow bass. Because I guess there's few places where they might overlap, and that might be in Alabama. But around here, you don't have to worry about that. When you get into Arkansas, you do have to kind of know where you're at, because in Arkansas, there's shadow bass, rock bass, and Ozark bass, and they all look alike. So you could catch depending on where you're at, you could catch, you know, one of the three. Arkansas falls outside of the Suncatch, so I didn't get to focus on the Ozark bass. But you know, maybe we'll expand the boundaries nationwide, and then we can throw it in there eventually. But like I said, you'll find them places like the Comite. If you see that range map, so that's the Amite Basin, is the furthest one to the west in Louisiana. And then I think the middle one is the Tickfaw. And then I believe the Bogachita. Or it might be the Tangipahoa. It might be the Amite, Tangipahoa, and Bogachita.
They're not in the Comite?
Comite is in the Amite watershed, so yes. And actually the upper right one is from the Comite. That's my picture, and I had a guy actually ask me if he could use it for Wikipedia once. So if you look up the article on Wikipedia, that's my picture. He didn't give me any credit, of course. You know, which I'm still a little bitter about. But that's my picture. That's my hand. My Accardo fly. But yeah, they're in the Comite. I've caught a bunch in the Comite. When I say a bunch, that's probably like 2 or 3. You're not going to find them very often. You could spend, 2 years and not catch one. Like I haven't caught one in probably 2 years. But target the root balls. I think Murray caught one this year. Brian's caught one this year.
Not this year, but yeah, Murray caught
Or
one.
last year you caught one? Okay.
3 last year?
Mhm.
Right.
One of those Louisiana sportsman shows had.
Yeah, they caught them. I think, was that the Bogachita?
No, that was the, Bogue Falaya.
Bogue Falaya,
Bogue
was Louisiana
Falaya.
sports
Yeah.
article.
When I saw it was in the Kobe.
Okay,
And it was,
like an article?
that was a bit,
It was a,
TV show.
okay.
There was the article that was talking about a guy who catches them regularly in the tributaries of the Bogue Falaya.
There's probably guys out there that know a lot more than I
I
do.
can't remember that.
By the way, your picture's still on Wikipedia.
Yeah,
It is.
Still uncredited.
It's still, yep.
still
there.
Yep, it says Shadow Bass from Comey River near Olive Branch.
It was, I used to be on an Alabama river fishing forum, and that guy was also on that forum. And he asked me, I was like, yeah, that's fine.
They call it red eye bass, right?
So they call, that's to the dismay of Matt Lewis, who wrote a book on red-eye bass. Rock bass are called red-eye bass as well. And they've probably been known as red-eye bass a lot longer than red-eye bass have even been called red-eye bass. But yeah, I would imagine people that catch them around here probably call them red-eye bass too. They have red eyes a lot of times when you catch them. But yeah, target those sandy rivers. And I don't know that, I'll be honest, I don't know that this range map is 100% accurate. I think as long as you're in a sandy river that's a Gulf slope drainage, not Bayou Sarah or Thompson Creek, because those go into the Mississippi. I think as long as you're east of that, I think you have the possibility of running into one. But the Comey's a good place. The Pushpatapa is a good place. If anyone's ever heard of that, that runs into Bogachita. Even the main rivers, the Amite, Tangipahoa, Bogachita, Pearl. Is that what you said?
Pushpatapa runs into the Pearl.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it does.
But yeah, that's all in the range.
Yeah, but you gotta go into those sandy streams, and you gotta fish around structure, I tend to find. You just gotta target that structure. It could be a woolly booger, it could be a crawfish pattern, maybe something slightly smaller, like a jig style, fly. But you never know, be on the lookout for them. They're always fun to catch. I think they're really cool looking, they're really neat. Rock bass, in our boundaries, it's only that northern portion of Alabama, which actually that means they don't actually enter. I thought they might overlap with shadow bass, but they don't. So that's the Tennessee River drainage. The fun part about targeting rock bass is that's where smallmouth live. So if you want to catch smallmouth in Alabama, you'll probably by bycatch catch a rock bass. I mean, it's kind of hard not to catch a rock bass. There's so many of them in those streams up there. I lived in Alabama for a year, and that's where I caught a bunch of them. They got some with size too. I was surprised at how big they actually get. You can get up to 12 inches for sure. They prefer clear flowing streams, rocks and boulders, limestone ledges, logs. You'll find them in lakes too, especially around rocks. But yeah, go target some smallmouth, and you'll probably catch those before you catch a smallmouth. Tennessee River watershed. Big eyes, so they'll hit big flies too. Don't be afraid to throw streamers. They'll definitely hit them. All right, now we're getting into these are like hopes and prayer type fishes. Spotted sunfish. This is the whole reason that I don't make people catch 19 of the 19 species, is because I don't know anyone that's caught one of these on the fly. I thought the same way with mud sunfish, but Brian showed me that it could be done. So I'm hopeful that someone will catch one on the fly. I know these are popular with aquarium guys, so maybe if you do some research to different sources than fishing, you might find some spots that we could all benefit from. Obviously, you're gonna have to size down your flies, but they're pretty. I mean, all I've seen is pictures, and they look. I could see why aquarium enthusiasts keep them. But mostly you're gonna have to go to the Gulf Coast drainages. I got a picture of habitat type. that's what apparently it looks like. So that's microfishing. I mean, you're essentially, dabbing, tiny nymphs, around all of this vegetation, just hoping, something darts out. That's a blue spotted sunfish. Habitat, submerged branches, swamps, oxbow lakes, small, slow-moving, soft-bottom streams, not widely distributed, but apparently abundant where present, according to the research. They max out at about 3 inches. So, bring your 1 weight or your 0. I think Sage used to make a 0. I don't know if they still do.
I don't think anybody does anymore.
They used to have a triple
It's
rod
got a
too.
triple rod.
They were
Yeah.
triple rod, yeah.
That might be the rod of choice. Of course, you're going to target that, and out comes
It's gonna be a shoe
spotted
fish.
bass or something. But they eat the same things that other sunfish eat. I mean, crustaceans, mollusks, aquatic insects, according to the research. Just make sure you're throwing, if you want to catch them, flies that are sized right. The other one is the banded sunfish. Again, small species. I think they're slightly bigger than the blue spotted, but I've never caught either of those. I've never seen either of those. Like I said, hopes and prayers. They live in sluggish, acidic coastal plain streams, which to me sounds a lot like flyer. It's probably flyer habitat, actually. Bogs and vegetated backwaters, lakes and ponds. Thick aquatic vegetation where the bottom is sand overlaid with silt and detritus. That's very specific. Very similar in size and behavior to blue spotted sunfish. I do have a location you can target them. Western range in the Perdita River watershed with documented specimens in Dias Creek, Alabama. I'm probably going to send you all to some guy's backyard, so don't blame me if you go looking for Dias Creek and it's private, because I don't know that I've followed up to see where those were actually caught. The last one is mud sunfish. And it's last because I don't know if you can see that tiny little range spot in southwestern Alabama near the town of Chatham. Beaver Dam Creek is what it is. And these are cool. I don't know if I have it written down what the scales are called. It's kind of like a catfish scale. So they don't have scales like the other sunfish. So they're in a genus all by themselves. So they have scales more like a catfish. I think it's like I couldn't even make it up. So they're almost going to look scaleless. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like a trout or something, where it's just like a smooth
Yeah.
skin. Yeah.
Which is interesting to me, for sure. But they get a little bit bigger than those last two sunfish. I think they can get up to 5 inches. No, none of these are my pictures. These are all pulled from the internet. Brian has a picture though. Like I said, one watershed with that. They do occur in other places. There's a lot more on the Atlantic slope streams. So, but according to Alabama, they're not necessarily endangered. I think there's enough numbers, and I don't feel bad in letting everyone go target them, because it was kind of like, let's just see if we can catch them. And Brian caught one, so it's like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
And he also
I
got-
read more. I mean, the papers that Alabama published said, some guy was fishing in a ditch or something in his private land, his backyard, and caught a strange looking fish. So he brought it to the people and they tested it, and they found more in that one little area, but nowhere else
Yeah.
in Alabama, and nowhere else even close to Alabama.
Right,
so.
nowhere even close. It's a relic population.
That was about 20 years ago, and so
Yeah.
I think they test, or they monitor the population, but I mean, no one's gonna go fish for them, but.
Yeah,
like
there's no
us.
closure to fishing, because I don't think you can get to that guy's property because it's on his land.
Right.
But you can target that stream where it runs under the road. And honestly,
You found other species there, right?
I found a bunch of other species there. I made the drive. So we had the Gulf Coast Council's, the Classic earlier this year. And because we were in Gulf Shores, I was like, well, on the way back home, let me just go see, if I can try. I gotta at least try. And it's out of the way. There's nothing close to this spot in Alabama. There's nothing up there. beautiful little habitat. It's like these little bogs, these little, ponded areas, clean water. And I caught flyer, I caught dollar sunfish, goggle eye, I don't know, maybe some bluegill, no mud sunfish. I caught a killifish that was pretty cool looking. But I mean, I hit 3 different spots, I think, that were drainages. One was the specific spot, I think, where you caught yours, and then 2 others were just places I picked out that looked similar, that were in the bigger watershed, hoping for the best. I did have something I briefly hooked that I didn't know what it was, but I didn't think it was sunfish. I thought it might have been like a pirate perch or something. Yeah, if you want to go, try for a, interesting species in southern Alabama, that's the mud sunfish. I found a gopher tortoise on the way, which was cool. They're thought to be nocturnal and feed on at night. So that's what I was blaming my lack of catching one too. It's like, I was here during the day. But Brian proved it can be done on his last trip.
The spot was shaded, so maybe that's all they need. Close to the night.
Yeah, I got a lot of resources too. If y'all want, I can share this presentation with whoever. But like I said, if you guys are already FFI members, start submitting those fish. And if you're not and you want to participate, consider joining. I did. It's like you can get a deal if you do a 3-year membership.
And do you remember what the price is? I don't remember off the top of my head right now.
It wasn't that bad.
Yeah, 30 for the minimal, and then it goes 50, 75.
I think it was 50 for 3 years, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think there's an extra fee if you want their quarterly magazine as well.
I did not for the magazine, but the ones that I have got, I like.
Good.
I think it's well done. The Fly Fisher magazine, yeah.
Your name's in at least one of them.
I
I wrote an article about the bass catch, and you're the only one whose name is listed under succeeding
That's
at
right.
it.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is if you do become an FFI member, you can participate in the cut catch or the bass catch. And I mean, I don't know if you guys know this, I'm a huge slam guy. I love a slam. If you're going to give me a reason to go, target, 3 or 4 fish in a location, I'm all for it. And I've even emailed Wildlife and Fisheries about, doing this same thing before I took this spot on the board. And crickets, I didn't get any response. So they're not interested in doing it for you.
You have
FFI
Concordia
is.
slam?
What's that?
Concordia slam?
No, I haven't fished. I've never fished Concordia. I need to get up there.
What about the gar slam? We need to get on that one.
It's gonna be in one day.
Gar slam in a day. That would be fun. I'm down. But that's all I got. I appreciate it, y'all.
Thank you.
What was the site that you mentioned up in the front that was the site that had the guy had done the, something.org had done the.
Yeah, KOAW.org.
That's on the
KOAW.
Yeah, I put it on there because it's a good resource.
You just search for
And he's got a YouTube channel.
He's
He's got stuff that goes in far more detail than you'll want.
Yes, and
the
the nice thing is, he's very responsive if you have questions.
Yeah.
I do have his email. If you guys have questionable sunfish,
Yeah, we've sent him
send it
questionable
to him. He'll
sunfish
get
for
back to
sure.
you within a day if he's in his office.
Well, my first thought was to put it in here on my favorites website links.
There you go.
Then I'll work all the other parts.
But yeah, he's very responsive if people have questions about sunfish.
He'll even give you, like, if you submit one, he'll even give you a breakdown of
Yes.
what species he thinks are in this hybrid,
Yep.
what percentage that would be, and why. He'll tell you, like, well,
He'd spend a lot of time on this stuff.
yeah.
got videos about gill rakers.
Yes,
Yep.
right.
You got tons of identification.
So whereas I look at a picture and I'm like, nope, doesn't look like it, He goes into the research.
What is this?
All right.
Yeah, who was on the Suncatch committee you referenced?
That's me.
Okay, just checking.
I checked with Chris. If there's a committee, it's gonna be me, Chris, Bill, Catch, and AJ.
Okay.
Basically, anyone who submitted a fish, because sometimes I include Brian.
Yeah, I was
He's-
just curious if there was an actual committee I was unaware of here.
No, but that's a Catch verbiage. He wrote that. The Suncatch Committee. He calls me the Suncatch Director.
Yeah, you got a title.
I have a title.